This idea of bogus news is hardly a new phenomenon, but the term fake news is. However, when we say new, I really mean it's always existed. In fact, the only thing that has changed is both the speed and magnitude in which misinformation is spread. The power to mislead and misinform has been made to the point we can see the evidence around the world for ourselves.
The fake news that thrived during the campaign.
That's fake.
False news stories.
So-called fake news, disinformation.
All the lies, fake news stories filling your news feed.
The Russians were promulgating fake news.
Spread of fake news.
Ever feel like the 6 o'clock news just ain't cutting it for you?
You don't see anybody between 20 and 30 getting their news from the evening news. You see them getting it online.
A dire need for institutions that tell the truth, that pursue the truth, and that chase it at all costs.
That was false and fake and never happened. I'm going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Fake. Don't we love that term, fake? What we've learned about fake over the last little while. Fake news. CNN, fake.
Everything from conspiracy theories, hoaxes, clickbait, propagandas, sponsored content to pseudoscience are all forms of deliberate misinformation. So what makes fake news any different? The issue of fake news has become more prominent in recent months, and social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. are fertile ground for the spread of fake news. This kind of news has been around for a while, and the seed of false information doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. Well, we hear the term so often, but do we really know what it means? The term fake news was in headlines frequently in the 2016 US election cycle. But the origins date back to before the printing press era, which made a profound improvement by the late 19th century. The term is now frequently used to describe a political story, entity, or person, but by no means are the terms of general news restricted to just politics. We currently still don't have a dictionary definition, and we probably won't anytime soon since we can break the term into words we can already find in the dictionary. I think that the PBS Idea channel defines fake news best. An incorrect or invented information, unsourced claims, or patently outlandish assertions. So we have a pretty decent definition of what fake news is, but where did this all start? Let's take a look way back when. The long history of fake news has probably been around since the beginning of mankind. Interesting things like the Egyptian culture and whatever groups where power and information matters, but specifically in America, it can be traced back as far as to Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin intentionally published stories alleging the British paid Native Americans to scalp men, women, and children in the rebellious colonies. Later during the election of the 1800s, Federalist newspapers attempted to keep people from voting for Thomas Jefferson by running fake stories about his death. The early days of the Republic were much different than the expectations of news stories that we have today. The notion of objectivity as we think today didn't exist in the early 19th century. Instead, there was a long history of newspapers being supported by political patronage. Political parties considered newspapers as extensions of what they did. They were tools. The point was to discredit and even savage the opponent with falsehoods, says journalism professor Barbara Friedman of the University of North Carolina. Eventually, the partisan press faded away in the 1830s, but a new form of fake news began to take shape. The penny press newspapers were cheap tabloid-style newspapers that were mass-produced in the United States. The penny press is desperate for readers because they were not funded by political parties, lied about sensational events to amuse their readers. With the introduction of the internet era, fake news increased vastly, and it is possible for anyone to create it who had computer access. In the early years of web use, hoax websites were created to mislead and deliberately spread biased news. The website martinlutherking.org was created by Stormfront, a white supremacist group, to try to mislead the readers about the civil rights activist by discrediting his work, his writing, and personal life. The fact that the website used the .org domain extension convinced a number of people that it was unbiased, because the domain was usually associated with nonprofit organizations working for good. The authors never came forward, but eventually the website was deactivated. It's easy to see that fake news has existed for quite some time, and some of the examples I have given had varying effects on others. Not all fake news is malicious, some had benign motivations, while others had intent to cause harm. The purpose of intentional or unintended for fake news still has consequences and could be serious. So there you have it, an age-old problem that has progressively gotten worse with the introduction of technology. What can be done about it? I'll talk more about that later. Throughout my research on the history of fake news, there were many questions I had, but for the ones I couldn't answer myself, I sought out the opinions of my peers. And what other campus best displays diversity other than the campus of tomorrow at Georgia Gwinnett College? I surveyed college students for a couple of days to talk about fake news and social media. Many interesting conversations were had, and these are some of the interviews I had with some of those students.
Where do you get your news source of information from?
A lot of places. So sometimes everything's online. So sometimes it might be on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that could be a social media outlet as well.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, and sometimes Facebook. Sometimes I get it through other like friends or people I'm like connected with on those social media sites.
Do you get your information from there as far as news?
No, not at all. An iPhone, so they have like a news app, and you can get a bunch of different articles from different sites there. So they have ones from Politico, they have ones from CNN, they have ones from the New York Times.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it's really good because they have it like a little newsstand, so you can pull up articles from all these different places. And then I downloaded the CNN app too. At first I was like mostly reading from CNN, but you kind of do get one-sided stories, so that's why I like to read different kinds of stories. Because I already do journalism, I think it's really important for me to get a wide variety of that.
It's how it's being used now. A lot of people, it's curious, it's kind of found itself at the center of the issue of freedom of speech, namely because it seems that our current President Trump has suggested that certain news agencies have their licenses, or rather their licensing, revoked on account of their sort of producing what he has claimed is fake news. I think that some of these allegations are actually valid in terms of in that many of these news agencies, it seems that they're being more like like those pamphlets you find at the gas station with like, oh look, this is Katy Perry and Kanye did this or this last week.
Where do you get information from? As far
honestly,
as
my Twitter, my TL is my newspaper. Like most of the time, like news literally hits Twitter the fastest because like people are like always on there. Like even the president, for example, like he's always on his Twitter. Like when I get the news, if I want to go into it more, I go watch it on like a news channel like CNN or Fox News, for example.
Social media. Do you participate in any social media?
Not really, but like sometimes Fox News channels something.
It ends up becoming kind of more like a gossip sort of, you sort of have a very explicit and intentional bias. Everyone has a bias. You can't escape that. The idea of unbiased reporting is impossible. But having an explicit and unabashed and obvious bias exhibited in how you relay facts, that's problematic. And I would say that it's reasonable to some extent to conclude that such kind of reporting of that nature is what could be considered fake news, because it's not really giving as objective as can be, it's not really giving a report that's as objective as can be given.
Chanel and Luna. I only get my information from Instagram.
From Instagram?
And sometimes Snapchat, like if someone posts something.
Same. Unique definition of fake news. Like, how can you tell if something's fake or not?
It's like a rumor. Like it's something, like how you spread something that's not real.
How about you?
Anything that's like put out in the world, so that's just to attract attention. Like it's nothing that's like actually very true. It's just about like getting people to like actually buy your stuff, or like look at you, or whatever it is, newspaper or like television. Anything that's like just to attract attention to your own cause.
In general, like where do you think the idea of fake news came from?
I think it came from like the way we define it now. It came from him actually, like, but it wasn't the way he thought it was. It was through the lies or like the things that he would say that weren't really true or weren't completely factual. So it was like an ironic plot twist, I guess, on how he defined it, because it kind of reflects on himself and not necessarily things around him.
We can all agree that technological advances have increased the spread of information, providing a platform for many points of view. artificial intelligence could become responsible for things like creating AI-generated reviews and fake news videos that are largely indistinguishable from what is real. A recent experiment done by researchers at the University of Chicago used computer algorithms to generate fake web reviews that were disturbingly successful. A team of computer scientists at the University of Washington have used AI to render visually convincing videos of the 44th president, Barack Obama, of things he has said before, rearrange his words to deliver a completely new context. Here's an example of using a neural network on 17 hours of footage to generate mouth shapes from audio clips.
Given this audio as input,
it's been less than a week since the deadliest mass shooting in American history.
Our method produces the following output.
It's been less than a week since the deadliest mass shooting in American history. And foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando.
Here's the ground truth video of Obama saying the same words.
Especially our friends who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender.
Here in this video, Stanford researchers use a similar methodology to alter the 43rd President George W. Bush facial expressions in real time using a webcam.
We present a novel real-time facial reenactment method that works with any commodity webcam. Since our method only uses RGB data for both the source and target actor, we are able to manipulate YouTube videos in real time. Here we demonstrate our method in a live setup. On the right, a source actor is captured with a standard webcam. This input drives the animation of the face in the video shown on the monitor to the left.
The disturbing consequences can become a reality as artificial intelligence matures with potential to create video-based fake news. That's the scary side of AI, but here's how AI is helping us to solve the fake news problem. AI systems have the possibility of being trained to analyze text, video, images, and audio at rates that could exceed the most efficient human. Researchers are helping to develop a machine learning approach to fake news detection. Steve Warner, a student working on the project, says that artificial intelligence can have all the same information as people, but it can address the volume of news and decipher validity without getting tired. People tend to get political or emotional, but AI does not. This technology is currently still limited, and as other mechanisms such as human-machine alliance help curb the fake news problems, in the years to come, people may need to become more skeptical about the media we see. President Donald Trump has helped fake news become more popular. It seems to be one of his favorite phrases, but maybe he's onto something. A Harvard study from University Shorenstein Center on Media, Politics, and Public Policy has supported his claims. It has revealed that many news outlets have been biased and favored certain political views over others, which means there's probably no such thing as completely fair and balanced. Many independent creators of fake news, much like the documentary we saw of the Macedonia story, describe this as a goldmine waiting to be discovered. What if it's a matter of media illiteracy in today's time? Media illiteracy presents a danger to society if individuals are not properly equipped to evaluate and analyze the endless stream of media messages they receive. We can't forget that people are attracted to rumors, gossip, scandal, and innuendos. It's the reason why things like TMZ, The Shade Room, Wendy Williams, Access Hollywood, and many other types of media even exist. A Los Angeles Times report claims that we're more likely to recall shocking claims that have a negative headline or sensational event. And no, I'm not saying don't look at news, but recognize the purpose of what media is for. Media is a good thing. It's there to connect us in ways we never thought were possible before. Here's some food for thought. So maybe they're right when they say, media doesn't tell us how to think, but what to think about. Maybe it's best to leave it at that and do our best to do what we can to stay informed. Think of it as digital activism that the author T.V. Reid discusses in his book, Digitized Lives. It doesn't have to be something dramatic. In Chapter 6, author T.V. Reid discussed how devoted Dumbledore fans created a nonprofit group called the Harry Potter Alliance to tackle a range of social issues and teach young people to have an outside-of-the-box approach towards issues of literacy, equality, and human rights. This is an example of how some are doing what they can using social media to create social change. John Spencer and many other scholars are instead looking at the root of the problem to help younger generations becoming digitally fluent. A Stanford study surveyed 7,800 students in 12 states, both affluent suburban schools, and inner-city schools and colleges. The students were asked to observe social media sites and other news sources to determine which was more credible or influential to them. Most students had trouble distinguishing between ads from news, and some were swayed from a powerful photograph. Psychologically, this can instill fear, much like fake news reports from the famous Orson Welles' War of Worlds broadcast in 1938. Those kinds of things can easily happen today, where photographs and videos can stir panic. By the age of 18, 88% of young adults regularly get their news from social media. It's not just the younger generations, we are all vulnerable to this. Anytime that we interact with social media, we get to decide for ourselves that the information presented to us is in fact or fiction. But if we don't have the skills to think critically for ourselves, we have the potential to be deceived. Sites like Facebook, Google, and Twitter are taking action to keep fake news from using ad platforms. They're using trial testing by flagging news and using nonpartisan fact-checking groups like PolitiFact and Snopes. Many are doing the best they can to tackle the situation up front, but it doesn't just end and begin there. What about the reputable news organizations who just happen to get stories wrong by not practicing corroboration? Will that mean they are fake news too? We can all be a model to others by practicing lateral reading, by jumping to other sources to investigate who runs the source. Another point made by Wall Street Journal's Sue Schallenberger that Google rankings are not based on the authoritativeness or the reliability, but on other factors as well. John Spencer, a former middle school teacher and current college professor, has made these creative YouTube sketchy videos, and here are his suggestions on what you can do to combat fake news in the digital age. Number 1, context. Look at the context of the article. When was it written? Where does it come from? Have the events changed since then? Is there any new information that could change your perspective? Number 2, credibility. Check the credibility of the source. Does the site have a reputation for journalistic integrity? Does the author cite credible sources? Or is it satirical? Is it on a list of fake news sites? Is it actually an advertisement posing as a real news story? Number 3, construction. Analyze the construction of the article. What is the bias? Are there any loaded words? Any propaganda techniques? Any omissions that you should look out for? Can you distinguish between the facts and opinions? Or is it simply all speculation? Number 4, corroboration. Corroborate the information with other credible news sources. Make sure it's not only the source making a claim. If it is, there's a good chance it's not true. Number 5, compare. Compare it to other news sources to get different perspectives. Find other credible sources from other areas of the ideological or political spectrum to provide nuance and get a bigger picture of what's actually happening. We can't stop it from happening, but it would be a shame if we didn't do everything within our power to fight it. The truth matters, and it starts with you.